Hello, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces and names, and welcome to anybody who I've not met before. It's nice that you're here. Thank you so much. I am going to share my screen because I've got some slides, so just bear with me while I do that. My background is a bit strange because I'm currently sat in my camper van. I'm away teaching at the moment, so this is why I have this very strange background. But let me put some nice pictures on the screen to start us off. Okay, here we are. So, briefly, a little bit about me. For those who haven't met me before, I am Charlie, and I'm based in Sheffield, but I travel around quite a bit for work, which involves all sorts of different things. I trained as a forest school leader in 2014, and since then, for the last 13 years, actually, I've been working in the environmental education sector, forest school sector, outdoor learning sector, this sort of melting pot of all these wonderful things, working for lots of schools, organisations like the RSPB and the wildlife trusts, and then going on to deliver training for learning through landscapes for a couple of years. So alongside this, I've been delivering some forest school training for around 6 years, and then more recently developed some of my own courses under the name of Foxfire Learning. And so there's just 2 on the screen that you can see now that I've developed. So eco-literacy for educators and noontime myths and medicines. For my day job that actually pays the bills, I work for a little charity called Grow in Sheffield, where we coach young people, 16 to 24-year-olds who are not in work educational training, to develop those such special soft skills through paid gardening. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell. Just a little shout out and thanks to John for inviting me along to host this month's webinar. Back in between, I think we were in between Yule and Imbolc. So back in sort of January time, I think I received the email in the depths of winter. And now we've fast forwarded around the wheel to almost coming up towards midsummer. It's nearly upon us. So we're going to talk about that a little bit in this webinar. And also a big shout out to Louise and Matt for doing all the techie stuff. I thought that was very slick with all the different links there at the beginning. So looking back, some of you might remember a webinar that John and Anna Richardson hosted just after Imbolc and before the spring equinox in February 2021. So quite a while back now. And then another one just before the winter solstice in 2022. And that was John speaking there about Yule. So those particular festivals, we're going to look at the other ones that complement those in the Wheel of the Year today, looking at the more spring and summery options. And we're going to briefly look back to Beltane, which was on the 1st of May, and then look forward to the summer solstice on the 21st of June. So for anybody watching the recording in the future, you might wish to take a little look at the wheel on the next slide and just have a look at where we are currently in the Wheel of the Year, which continuously turning with these wonderful 8 sabbats or festivals that we can celebrate to mark these important times in the northern and southern hemispheres. So hopefully this has moved on to my next slide. Lou or Matt, tell me if not. So we've got the 12-month solar calendar. So the one we use today, most of us, well, probably all of us, use the January to December calendar. We've been using that since 1582, and it was adopted when Pope Gregory the 13th decided to add 10 days to the one we used to use before that, its predecessor, which was the Roman calendar. And the primary reason for this was to ensure that Easter would fall in the spring months of March or April each year. Now, even though this is our solar calendar, sort of going from January to December, 365 days is roughly the amount of time that the Earth takes to travel around the sun. So it's a solar calendar. The actual reason why Easter shifts each year is because it falls on the Sunday after the first full moon following the ecclesiastical equinox. So that is a fixed date of the 21st of March. Hopefully that made sense. That's quite a lot of information there. So that full moon, which is quite important to determining Easter, is also known as the Paschal and the ecclesiastical moon. And we've got that date there, the 21st of March, that you might be able to see here on the wheel picture, marked as Ostara, also known as the spring equinox. If you're thinking of the wheel as a clock, it's at 3 o'clock, so between the 20th and the 23rd of March. Equinox, meaning equal day and equal night. I'm sure many of you already know that. So we've got that time of the year when we get roughly the same amount of daylight and nighttime. So it changes each year in the astronomical calendar. However, this one that the church uses to decide when Easter is a fixed date of the 21st of March. So looking back at the Roman calendar, they actually use the moons, the cycles of the moons, and the seasons of the agricultural year to determine their calendar. And this was more of a lunar year of 354 days. So nearly 10 days short, well, 11 days short, but because the Romans were quite superstitious about even numbers, they just decided to add another day on. So it was actually 355 days long. And some of the months that they had of these 10 months in the 355 days still around today. So we've got September to December that we still use. So these were used by the Romans as well. And then other relics from the Roman way of marking the passage of time we can still see in our days of the week. So they're quite obvious when you look at the names in languages from mainland Europe. So if anyone knows a bit of Spanish, martes for Tuesday in Spanish is Mars Day, if you sort of look at the etymology there. And if you know a bit of French, jeudi, which Thursday, is Jupiter's Day. So we're looking to the planets here from this Roman inspiration to mark and name the days of the weeks. So in English, in the Monday to Sunday that we use to mark our weeks as we go by, we've got a bit of a blend. We've got the Roman influence, so with Monday being Moon Day and Sunday being Sunday, obviously, and then we've got Anglo-Saxon and North influences. So for the Anglo-Saxons, we've got the obvious one being Thursday being Thor's Day, and then for Friday is Frigg's Day. So Frigg is the goddess, the Norse goddess of home and fertility. So I've talked a little bit about the lunar calendar, the solar calendar. So let's look back at the lunar cycle. So the moon herself, she completes 12 full cycles in that 354-day period of time that the Romans used to mark their year. And that is, as I've mentioned already, that is 11 days short of this Gregorian calendar, which we now use today. So that's more of a solar calendar of 365 days. So every couple of years, about 2.5 years, we end up with, on this lunar calendar, a 13th full moon. So this is why we get the once in a blue moon. It's actually more common than perhaps we think. Every 2.5 years, we sometimes get a 13th full moon. And often lots of calendars still use the moons to mark the passing of what we'd call the months. And so the name for each of the month's full moons, they're quite heavily influenced by the agricultural season. So in September, you might know that there's the harvest moon as a lovely example there, really obvious one. If you're interested in diving into the names of the moons a bit more, I'd highly recommend this wonderful book called The Almanac. I'm just holding it up to my camera here. This is by Leah Leendertz, and she publishes them every single year. And in there, she's got the names of different moons. So you can have a little look at that. And I'll make sure I share that in the chat later on. Okay. So I'm going to show you one more slide, and then we're going to move on to some breakout rooms and have a bit more of a chat about this wonderful wheel here. Just to point out where Beltane is before I move on is here down at sort of 4 or 5 o'clock. And we've just had Beltane on the 1st of May. And in terms of the Celtic wheel of the year, we consider that to be the first day of summer. However, other calendars don't think we're sort of at the first day. The astronomical calendar says we're at the first day of summer on the 21st of June. So sort of that summer solstice time. So we've got a few discrepancies there with when does summer actually begin? And I know there's lots of debates out there around when they actually started. So the wheel of the year is actually quite a modern calendar. We call it the Celtic Wheel of the Year often because the Sabbats are very much rooted in Celtic traditions and cycles, but the way it's been put into this calendar format is as new as from the 50s and the 60s, where the ancient Celtic celebrations were revived by modern day pagans and Wiccans. And just to point out here, Mabon, which is this autumn equinox here at 9 o'clock, This was introduced as recently as the 70s. So we've got some names here that are quite recent. However, obviously the marking of this, the passing of the time is still very ancient. So we've got a bit of a blend here of old and new. And just quickly mention, I keep saying I'm going to move on to breakout rooms, but I'm going to quickly mention here just the quarter days and the cross quarter days. So we've got quarter days. So imagining you're splitting the year into 4. So we've got the equinox Ostara, the summer solstice, which is coming up, Litha, and then Mabon, the autumn equinox, and finally Yule, the winter equinox. So that's just going around in relation to the calendar year, but obviously it's a wheel, so it keeps turning, there's no start or finish. So these are the quarter days or solar fire festivals. And then we've also got the introduction of cross quarter days. So if you imagine drawing a cross on the wheel, which are the lunar fire festivals. So we just had Beltane on the 1st of May. And then we've got on the 1st of August, we've got Lunasa. And then the 31st of October, Samhain, you might know more familiarly as Halloween, and the 1st of February is Imbolc. Okay, so I've thrown lots of information at there. I'm just going to share actually in the chat a link to a fantastic book by Rebecca Beattie, who tells you all about these wonderful nuances in terms of when the wheel was sort of written down and where the different festivals come from, and all these different names that there's some sort of overlap with different types of marking these different seasons. And then just to say on the right hand side of the screen that you can see here, hopefully, we've got the different astronomical events. So it's actually what's happening in the sky. So we've got obviously the spring equinox back in March, and then the summer solstice, which we're coming up to, where we're getting the most hours of daylight. The autumn equinox, so again, that halfway point, so equal hours of daylight, equal hours of nighttime, and then finally the winter solstice. So this is actually what the Earth is doing as it travels around the sun. Okay, I've just thrown loads of information at you. Now I'm going to ask you to have a chat to each other about it. So in a moment, I'll ask Matt to open up the breakout rooms, and the invitation here is to ask, are any of these festivals familiar? Are they already part of your practice? And if so, how do you celebrate them? So you're very welcome to obviously write anything in the chat that comes up, and perhaps nominate a speaker from your group to feedback after we've had a chance to have a chat for about probably 5 minutes. I think will be enough time. So if Matt's ready to open out some breakout rooms, we'll have a chat in those until 8:25 about any of the festivals that are already part of your practice. Welcome back. Hopefully everyone made it back okay. Wonderful. Has anyone got any feedback they'd like to share with the wider group before I start sharing some slides again? You're welcome to pop things in the chat or unmute. Or Poe, you've got your hand up. Let's hear from you.
So we all agree in our group that the thing that really helps us with marking the celebrations is that book, The Children's Forest, that John Cree recommended that to us when you came to our forest school, and we use it all the time now. So if you haven't got it, I thoroughly recommend it.
Thanks, Poe. Thank you for sharing that. I'm just going to type that in the chat so we've got a record. It's a fantastic book, The Children's Forest, a really beautiful way of looking through different rituals throughout the year and the Wheel of the Year in particular. Anybody else got anything they'd like to share? The wider group? John, is that you?
Oh God, it's just a quick one. Yeah, it was just about the sort of interesting. The ones that we concentrate on Forest School are Beltane and Samhain, but partly because the two are intrinsically linked. But it's some of the others are hard, like they're not in school term, like Amas Nuanza and Winter Solstice and all of that. But for me, it was digging into local and folk tales that I've often found that resonate with us as forest school leaders that dig it. So I've always told the Tamerlane because I'm the Scottish thing, but the Tamerlane is that traditional Scottish folk tale that links Beltane with Samhain. So it's often those. It's trying to look at the the stuff that chimes with you sometimes really helps, I think, because it's really hard to get all of the 18 in a forest school setting. And then you think, oh, we're forcing this, so it's that, just that what really chimes, and how do we even honor it, not necessarily in a big celebratory way. So yeah,
It could be a small ritual.
it could be a small ritual.
It doesn't,
Yeah,
yeah, it doesn't have to be anything huge, like putting up a maypole and organising,
yeah,
practicing the
doing all that
dancing.
dancing. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Anybody else like to share? All right, I'll just mention what came up in our group. I think one person mentioned the Children's Forest again, but also spoke about the how it's, yeah, like John said, it's quite difficult to always do these in terms of the where the festivals fall in the academic year, and yeah, just taking ones that resonate with you, I think, is a really lovely way just to go forward with your practice. And it's almost like you don't actually have to say it's they've got all these special Celtic names. It can just simply be the 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter, and just having some kind of way of marking that transitional phase that we're so lucky that we have here in the northern hemisphere, and obviously in the southern hemisphere, sort of in the opposite time frame. Just to honor that there's always this change, and it's so cyclical, it's always coming back round, and we're just noticing what comes up each year in different places, perhaps in the forest, in the garden, wherever you're working. So yeah, thinking about that cycle, that cyclical nature that always offers us the opportunity for sort of letting go, and the death, and then the renewal, and that change moving on. All right, I'm going to come back to my screen sharing. Okay, just to also acknowledge this wonderful artwork, this beautiful painting, Wheel of the Year, is by an artist called Sombras Blancas. I don't know if it's cut off on the bottom of my screen that I'm sharing with you there, but she gave me kind permission to share that with you. So just thanks to her for the recording. Now, wheels come up a lot, so I just wanted to point out some more wheels. Hopefully, check that's moved on. Yeah, that's moved on your screen. So just some different wheels. I went down a bit of a rabbit hole, as I often do when I look into these things that I really find fascinating and really enjoy. So the Bauer Chakra, this wonderful wheel here on the left, is the wheel of existence, or the wheel of birth and death. And this is found painted on the walls outside Tibetan Buddhist temples in Tibet, India and China. And it goes back to an early text from an Indian school from Chinese and Tibetan traditions. So going way, 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 way back. So we've got this way of marking the passing of time within a circle, the sort of life and death style. And then we've got the Western zodiac, which we're probably familiar with marking the different months according to what we might know as our star signs. So, and obviously there's different beginnings and ends for those throughout the months, in terms of if you're a Taurus and you're born between these particular dates. So they obviously changed. It's not from like the May people are this one, the June people are this one. That obviously has different dates as well. And this image is from 1288, an old image of showing that wheels again coming up from the a medieval text. I'm not going to go into all the detail, but the chap was from Occitan region of France. So yeah, that's in the astrological calendar there. So difference here between astronomical, astrological sound really similar. So I have to really remind myself, this being the astrological calendar, often the ram, so Aries, the ram, is considered to be the sort of starting point. But as we said already, it's a wheel, it keeps going round and round and round. And that coincides with the spring equinox for us, that bursting into life, that rebirth. So that's another sort of synchronicity there. And then last but not least, on the far right side here, we've got the Chinese zodiac. So we've got those animal elements and energy with each year. So these are according to each year rather than month. And actually this year we've got the year of the water rabbit. So there's an element associated with it and an animal, the yin water rabbit to be precise. And then in Vietnam, they have the year of the cat this year. And again, this is a calendar that's influenced by the moon. So the second new moon after the winter solstice marks Chinese New Year. And just to come back to our wheel of the year, we've got that word solstice that comes up at the winter solstice or Yule, and the summer solstice, which is coming up very soon in just over a month's time. And the etymology, again, something I'm really interested in, is that solstice means sun stands still. So sol being sun and stis being an old Latin word for the standing still. So we'll have that happening really soon at Litha, or midsummer on the 21st of June. Okay, so another circle. This is the Celtic tree calendar. Hopefully some of you have come across this before. We've got some beautiful Ogham letters right in the middle of the calendar here. And as the calendar goes around from, well, you can start anywhere you like, wherever you are in terms of the year, but we've got all these different trees that are representing each month, and then also ivy and reed. So a bit of a tangent away from trees, but commonly known as the Celtic tree calendar. So this is again linked to the lunar cycles. Each tree has 28 days, or is sort of in terms of the name of it is for the 28 days. And this focuses our attention again of those changing seasons, having a look to those trees to see what they're up to in the particular month that's named after them. So although this feels like a very ancient Celtic representation of a calendar, again, a little bit like the wheel, the way it's been put into this format is actually quite modern. So it was Robert Graves who came up with the wheel format just like this. He first published it, but obviously it's come from very ancient traditions. It's just that it was written down quite recently in 1946, so relatively recently. So you can go away and have a little look into Robert Graves, because he studies a lot of mythology, Celtic mythology. So one of his famous texts is the White Goddess. But if you're a more modern take, I'd highly recommend, if you've not come across her before, Sharon Blackie. She's got some fantastic books all about these different ways of marking the Celtic festivals and how they play a part today. So we've got 13 months here in this calendar. So this wonderful wheel, this tree calendar. And I just thought it would be lovely to share, because this is the way I do a lot of my planning. So I have a look at where we're at in this calendar and really focus in on that particular tree. So as you'd probably expect at the moment, we're in Hawthorn month. So the May, also known as the May. So we've got this month here of looking really closely at a wonderful hawthorn who's looking absolutely gorgeous at the moment, blooming with her beautiful white flowers. But we have other tree calendars. Other tree calendars are available. So there is one of Dusty Miller, who's also known for his communing on tree dryads. So you might want to have a little look into him as well, if you're interested in other tree calendars. And then I also just wanted to briefly talk about a couple of other concepts of the passage of time and how we mark the passage of time. And this is particularly relevant with a recent Emergence magazine, if you listen to the podcast or read the magazine, with an author called Jenny Odell. And she talks about chronos and kairos time. So again, Greek words here coming up. And she describes how we are trapped in chronos time, so the time which has set the stage for the climate crisis essentially and what's going on in the world today, because we're sort of trapped in this very much reaching towards the bit of the rat race. So the time that you're just going about your life, your biggest question is, how can I get to next week? What's on my to-do list? And we're not really noticing what's actually happening in the more than human world around us. So I just wanted to say about kairos time. So another concept, which again is from Greek, and it translates to the right, critical or opportune moment. So a lovely way of just marking a different way of noticing time. And it's sort of like an interruption, that thing that happens that makes you stop and go, oh, wow, I'm not just in this complete sort of go, 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 go. I'm actually noticing what's going on. That's why I've popped that picture in there with the lightning strike. So it's something that you might remember for years later. It could be the birth of a baby, it could be a big storm that has a really big impact, some sort of interruption that really brings you back to the mortality of our lives and that wheel that's keeping on turning, but not in the sort of rat race way of like the birth and death and rebirth. So just sort of bringing us back to the more than human world. And then the last couple of concepts I'm going to introduce here, because I know I'm throwing a lot of vocab out there, is horizontal and vertical time. So you might have heard of this before, with horizontal time being the kind of work, day-to-day, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And then the weekend is where you're kind of aiming towards. If none of us are working at the weekends, hopefully you're having a bit of a break at some point in the week. But then she's also talking about vertical time. So the way we'd feel if we were looking at a really beautiful view from the top of a mountain, for example, and time, some of us might have noticed we've done this before, and it's almost like time stops. You're looking at this view, this sunset, or a brand new baby, again, coming back to sort of birth, and those incredible moments in life, and looking at the fragility of life as well. And I just felt that this was relevant to Forest School, because we have that opportunity to notice what brings us awe and wonder. And that is very much what vertical time is about, of like getting really absorbed, lost, and not even worrying about the ticking of the clock, or even what the weather's doing sometimes, if we're really absorbed in something that's really creating that sense of awe and wonder. So I'm going to move us on now to, just very briefly, I mentioned hawthorn already. I'm just going to show you a lovely picture of some hawthorn. So this is just an example from one of my courses. So as I've mentioned already, another way of looking at the wheel is looking at how it relates to the Celtic tree calendar, and looking at which trees are actually around at the moment. Who are we noticing this month, and focusing in on those particular trees and their folklore. You might know that hawthorn has a lot of association with the fairy folk, and in Ireland even today roads will be diverted around the hawthorn trees. So even just having that focus, I know we've said already, oh, it's quite a lot to do with eight sabbats, 8 festivals, trying to mark them every time, but it could be coming back to a ritual around, oh, it's May, the May flowers are out, here's hawthorn, let's just really look at what hawthorn is doing and focus in with a ritual around just this one tree and what she's doing at this particular time in the wheel of the year. Okay, so if you had a little chance to read the invitation email, I would love to know what practices invoke the summer solstice for you. So this is moving into how can we mark these in a ritualistic way, in perhaps ways that we're already doing, but maybe we don't realise. So just some pictures there to give some examples. Perhaps picking strawberries makes you think of the summer solstice. Maybe making some elderflower cordial. Could be, maybe it's a bit late, but I was thinking about when swifts and swallows come, when that falls in terms of the wheel of the year. That would maybe be more of a Beltane time. So in order to share this, I'm going to use a bit of tech here, and I'll show you exactly what we're going to be doing. Hopefully, if you've got a picture to hand, maybe on a phone or on your computer, if you're sharing on your computer. We're going to use something called Padlet, which is just a beautiful way of creating a collage, essentially. So if you've not used this one before, it's very, very, very easy. I'll pop the link in the chat in a moment. And when you're ready to share something, you don't have to put a picture in if you don't want to, but sharing a way of marking the summer solstice that's coming up in a month's time, so on the 21st of June. And you can just click on this plus arrow in the bottom right hand corner to add a post, and then drag from your computer, if you're on a computer, a picture, or you'll feel free just to write in here something that you feel is relevant and maybe also realistic that you'd like to do for the summer solstice that's coming up on the 21st of June. So I'll share that link in the chat. If you've got any questions, please let me know. So we'll probably, I was going to say we could do this in breakout rooms, so maybe we can have a little bit of a chat about this. I'm just looking in the chat now. Yeah, I see some questions in there. I'll answer them while we're in our breakout rooms. But Matt, if you're happy to, could we please go into our breakout rooms and have a bit of a chat about what invokes the summer solstice for us? That would be great. Thank you. So Yes, I'm just saying that we didn't perhaps get a chance to pop anything on the Padlet yet. So I'm just going to reshare it. Just trying to find the link. Sorry about that. Would anyone like to just say what they were talking about in their breakout rooms about how they might mark the summer solstice in just over a month's time? I'll let you unmute yourselves and just speak to the room.
Sorry, it's me again. It's been good to do this. Just remembering some of the things that kids have done in the past that have just led on to something that was marked. So I remember one year we were playing about with shadows on the playground. And they've been looking at sundials and then they decided to play with shadows, tree shadows, and make a tree and compare shadows and do a little celebration around the tree, which was pretty sweet. And I was just remembering another year we had one kid who got really into Stonehenge and all of that. They decided to make little stone wood henges for his school, but we gave them this challenge to say, well, can you wake up when the sun's coming up and just see if you can get your parents to help you with the exact direction, see if we can then really map this on around summer solstice. So, and it seemed to work. It tied into some maths they were doing in school, but it was really sweet. It was lovely. It's often the kids that come up with things, isn't it? If they've got some inspiring stuff happening elsewhere, they just bring it to school.
Thanks for sharing, John. It's beautiful. Well, in our breakout room, we had Louise singing to us, which was just lovely. All about the oak tree. So the Children's Forest came up again. I think everyone's probably going to go away and buy a copy if you haven't got one already. So the songs in there for different seasons. So there's one particularly about oak for the summer solstice, which is absolutely beautiful. I've popped the link. If you did have a picture you wanted to share, I've just popped it back into the chat. So I'm sorry that if you wanted to share something you couldn't earlier on. I'm just going to share that screen actually, just to show what people have said. Here we go. So some folks, they like to play hide and seek in the long grass. They maybe camp out and have a fire, just appreciating the sun, just stopping and thinking, thank you, sun. Thank you for giving all your light and warmth and just energy and life to the earth. Oh, someone talks about the opposite solstice. So only 6 months ago, we had the shortest day. Isn't that amazing? So yeah, this is beautiful. And then nature meditation, noticing trees that have been planted. This with Jacqueline in my group. And who else have we got? We've got someone typing. So I'm just going to wait for them to finish typing and then we'll share that last one. Oh, sun printing. Is that heliographs? I think that's the right word for it. I did try and do that last year and didn't have much luck, but I'd like to try again this year. Do you have to have special blue paper? Perhaps someone can tell me that answer to that in the chat. Beautiful. I love this picture. Looks like a castle in Scotland. I don't know if anybody who posted that could tell us where that is.
That was me. That's Arundel Castle.
Arundel Castle. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah,
oh,
South Coast.
That's beautiful. Was that from last year? Last summer solstice?
Yeah, that was last summer. That's the River Arun. And there's a footpath and I just stood there for about half an hour. So yeah, got lost in that view.
Oh, beautiful. And the reflection. Stunning. Wonderful. Oh, cyanotype. Thanks, Jacqueline. Cyanotype paper. Yeah, and Agni as well. Yeah, the blue paper. Wonderful. Okay, so we've got 5 minutes and I'm just going to move us back around to thinking about the moon. So finally, we've talked about different cycles through the wheel of the year. And I'm particularly interested in how the moon shows up in terms of how we mark the passage of time. I'm just getting my screen share back up. And so on Friday, we have a new moon. The moon has been waning. So I don't know if anybody here, you might mark the full moons and the new moons. We've got a new moon on Friday. Just making sure I share with you. Sorry about this. Thank you so much for your patience. So Here we go. This is just a little infographic to show the Taurus new moon sign. And we've got Friday, just bringing us full circle now in a very apt way. Friday is Frigg or Freya's day. And then if we look at some of the other languages, Vendredi, you might know from French, is Venus's day. So very relevant to this, the moon's energy, with Taurus being the astrological sign, which is ruled by the planet Venus. So we've got the energy of practicality, sensuality and physicality. And that again was from the Almanac, this wonderful seasonal guide by Leah Leendertz, I mentioned earlier on. So she talks about the astrology and how that shows up each month in her almanac this year. But just to say a few intentions, so if you like to mark this time twice a month, the full moon, the new moon in Taurus is much of a time for self-care, making sure we're eating our fruit and vegetables, moving our bodies in a joyful way. It's a great time also on the new moon to set intentions. So if you're committing to something, like maybe you want to start meditating every day, or maybe going and finding your local hawthorn tree, or each tree in the Celtic calendar once a month. Any of those practices that you might have an intention to do, this is a great time to start it, because it's a really good energy and earthy, grounding Taurus energy to start sort of helping that to be nurtured and nourished, and those goals to really stick. They do stick, so choose them carefully. So make sure they're sort of wholesome ones. And this is really a great time to walk barefoot. I felt this week really cool to just take my shoes off and get barefoot on the grass and really feel into that connectivity with the earth. We might also feel a little bit of resistance to change at this time, so it's not necessarily a bad thing, but just being aware of this. If you've got some opportunities that come up for a bit of a change in directions, that if they're towards your goals, then that's a great thing, and it might just be moving past that sticking point and embracing those potential opportunities. So that's just a little bit about the new moon in Taurus. That comes from, I've mentioned the Almanac already, and also a really great book, Cosmic Health. And she looks at the Wheel of the Year in this book as well, and very much about positive psychology too, which is fascinating. So there's a little bit about the new moon, and I'm just gonna say thanks so much for listening and sticking with me for all the tech. Just one final slide. Not the Ogden one. Thanks for participating. Does anyone have any questions or reflections? Feel free to type in the chat, or you're very welcome to unmute. I know that someone asked about the Robert Graves book, so I'm just going to put the link to that in the chat. I just say as well, for anyone that's still hanging around, I highly recommend next month's webinar with Emily Whiteley, all about sensory circuits. She's absolutely fantastic, and I have taken part in her workshop in real life, in person, and she's brilliant. So do make sure you come along to that one. It's fantastic. Really, really useful.
Yes, thank you very much, Charlie, for sharing. Lots of people saying how much they've enjoyed this, so really, really good. It's worth saying that any of these links or these the authors and things, that resources that have been recommended will go in the email that goes out with the YouTube link. Fantastic. Thank you very much for all those amazing comments. It is also worth saying that we've on the webinars page for on the Forest School Association website, we have got all of the Zoom links ready to register for up to the end of this year, up to December. So please do feel free to go ahead and book those. We might have a couple of changes of what's going to be the offer on those particular some of the webinars later on in the year, but we're hoping to get everything smoothed out, and please do feel free to register anyway, and we'll update you with an updated schedule should anything major change. But I'd just like to say thank you again to Charlie for sharing her expertise and knowledge about our celebration and cycles. And if you feel like it's time to pop off, then please feel free. And if not, and you want to stick around and say hello and have a bit of networking, then please feel free. We're on till 9:30 if there are people here. Otherwise, thank you very much, and we shall see you hopefully for the next one in June.